Get ready.
Hi, my name's Kaz Riley, and this is the Hypnosis 247 Live Network, and this is Trancing in the Sheets. And today I've got something a little different for you. I have none other than Nimja Trancing in the Sheets with me today. He is a hypnotist, an erotic hypnotist based in the Netherlands. He has 155,000 followers on his YouTube channel. He is the creator of Nimja Hypnosis, which looks at both erotic and non-erotic hypnosis. And I'm very happy to have him on the show today. Thank you for joining us today, Nimja.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So let's talk about the obvious thing first, because one of the things that happens with erotic hypnosis, the first thing, of course, is negotiation and consent, isn't it? So let's just make it clear to everybody that whatever you do, it's always with negotiation and consent, and what that actually means.
Yes. Yeah. Well, whenever you do, especially erotic hypnosis, when you are intimate with someone to some degree, like either physically or mentally, it is extremely important to discuss limits, consent, desires, likes, dislikes, even things like safe words and how to use them while in trance. Because without this, you don't have a framework to do it in safely. And safety is very important whenever you do something, well, like erotic or kinky, even more so when you do something as intimate as hypnosis, where you're very directly interacting with someone's unconscious.
So when two people are working together with hypnosis, because it is always about two people working together, there's the hypnotist and a subject, isn't it? It's before any hypnosis happens, there's always that process of negotiation, isn't there, in which two people decide all those things that you've just said, what's okay, what's not okay, how it can be stopped if it needs to be, and also what the goals are. So, people will hopefully know what the outcomes are when they're interacting in a way we're using hypnosis in a more intimate manner.
Yes. And a lot of people follow sort of a set list of things that they go over. So to actually talk about this in a practical manner, we go over likes and limits, things that people want, things that people don't want. And you check this depending also on the type of hypnosis you do, if you're doing it online or in person, if touching is involved, if nudity is involved, what kind of intimacy is involved, if any effects are lasting or non-lasting. A lot of people have the standard rule of keep everything within the session, but other people enjoy having lasting effects, like a surprise for later, like a post-hypnotic suggestion. And it's just very important to discuss this. What's very interesting is that it's just as important for a hypnotist to learn how to discuss consent as well as a subject to discuss it. A lot of people have difficulty expressing their limits or saying no, which is why generally people are taught to look for the empathic yes or the enthusiastic yes.
Yes.
But even without that, it's very important that the subject also learns, what are my limits? What do I want out of this?
So I think with this is stuff that we should all learn generally in life anyway, in terms of, especially in terms of sexual interaction. It's something that, I think the vanilla world could take and learn a lot from, in terms of how things are done with things like this, to really understand how that works. So it's, these are great suggestions and a really great way of doing it, just in general life, I think. So
it's true. Yeah. It's actually interesting that in a like BDSM or kink situation, the pre-discussion of consent causes a lot more safety and security than in a lot of vanilla situations. Because most of the time, as long as consent is properly discussed, there is clarity between both parties about what the expectations and the desires are.
Absolutely. I know this is something that I teach when I'm working with kink-friendly hypnotherapy, about how to, because often some of the things that can happen can be seen as abusive when actually it's completely consensual. And we often see things in relationships that seem consensual that actually are very abusive. So it's it's a great that, you know, certainly in the hypno kink world, which we'll kind of come on to, even though often people never meet, it's all done online, or it's even done by audio file, then this is all done with such respect. I think that's the word, isn't it? Respect, consent, negotiation. It's
well, it is the yeah, that is the ideal. It's of course not everyone has equal experience, or not everyone is equally well informed. Fortunately, in general, the hypno-kink community is very open about teaching other people how to discuss consent, and like helping people discover how to speak up for yourself and how to trance safely.
Okay. And it may be a surprise to some people watching this that hypnosis itself is even a kink. You know, people, you know, it's, I know when I teach quite often, people have heard of erotic hypnosis, but actually, you know, hypno kink comes in many forms, doesn't it?
Very much so. The like sexual and arousal parts and the like increased intimacy of connecting unconsciously is a very small part of the hypno-kink world, or the hypno-kink experience. For example, we have a Jungle Book where Kaa hypnotizes Mowgli, and there are a lot of people who responded very strongly to this feeling of being controlled by another entity, or the idea of mind control or brainwashing. And we can see this in media, like it's quite abundant. Sorry, yes.
That's all right.
So like brainwashing and mind control are also one of the parts of hypno-kink, where people just enjoy the idea of someone else taking over their mind or taking control for a little while.
And let's be really clear about this. It's, you know, when we talk about brainwashing and mind control, I mean, certainly brainwashing, it has such a negative kind of connotation, doesn't it, in the outside world? But where people are talking about the idea of and enjoying something, consensually kind of willingly giving up control to somebody else within a negotiated and consensual context. Yes, it's fun. You know, it's like, you know, it's a game essentially in some ways.
Yes, it's living out a fantasy. It is a little bit like how bondage in the wrong context is very wrong. Like tying someone up without permission is completely wrong. However, with consent and with permission, and if this is a fantasy or a desire that the person has, it is extremely enjoyable. And the same goes for brainwashing. This is something that these people want. They want to be brainwashed. They want to feel powerless and mindless and under the control of the evil hypnotist, cloak not included.
But that's it, isn't it? You know, it's a great way for people to kind of be able to explore things, actually, sometimes sexually, sometimes just about their fantasies, sometimes eroticism, sometimes just to experience something, you know, like the idea of being frozen. You know, sometimes it's very much like stage hypnosis that's just been transferred into a one-to-one kind of situation, but probably with more consent there, actually. But some of the things that you see within an erotic hypnosis kind of setting actually is not that different, is it, to some of the stage hypnosis that's out there?
Yeah, there's some things that are like definitely overlap. Nowadays, you even see stage hypnosis with some erotic content. But the main difference is that there's very rarely, as far as I've been able to see, any pre-negotiation about any of that. So while it's then an intense experience, it can also be quite humiliating in an unpleasant way. The whole point is that when you want to do something consensual and you discuss these likes and limits, you can do so in a way that is not only an enjoyable experience in the moment, but a fulfilling memory to look back to.
Absolutely. And people do experience really high levels of euphoria, don't they, you know, with hypnosis. So it's, you know, and that can be enhanced, and, you know, all kinds of feelings can be created that perhaps...
And even outside of that, a lot of people enjoy the simple sensation of falling into trance. Just the slow descent of letting go, or the tingling feeling of your body sort of drifting away. A lot of people have a like almost fetish for that feeling by itself, outside of all the things you can do with hypnosis as a tool.
Absolutely. And, you know, when people do that without any erotic element, don't they? You know, they just love to go into hypnosis and would happily stay there for long periods of time because it does feel so lovely. And it allows, it's a method of escapism in as well, isn't it? You know, which is, you know, everybody needs that in the world, I think. I think that's an important part of life, is being able to shut out life in whatever way kind of works for you. And for many people, you know, hypnosis, erotic or otherwise, actually is a great way to do that, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it very much is. And it's not uncommon to see someone almost reluctant to awaken again because they're like, no, it's so nice here.
Yeah, well, I think we see that across the board with hypnosis. I see that. I had that this morning here, clinically in this office for somebody I was working with for anxiety and weight loss. So it's a very common thing. It is. If you know, when people think about erotic hypnosis, I think they often they actually think about women being hypnotists, and obviously you're a man, and you know, you have one of the most successful and well-known erotic hypnosis channels. You have a Patreon. I mean, 155,000 people attached to your YouTube channel. You know, there are a lot of clinical hypnotists that don't have that many people. So we know that it's a very popular thing out there in the public world. How do you kind of how do you kind of manage people's expectations, or how do you measure up to expectations of what an erotic hypnotist is and who you are?
Well, first of all, it helps to not typecast yourself too strongly. So a lot of erotic hypnosis out there usually caters to one specific audience. For example, enslavement or dollification, and do a lot within a very narrow field. I've chosen also for my own joy to go much wider. So my channel doesn't have exclusively erotic hypnosis. It has some clinical hypnosis, some recreational hypnosis, things to help you study, things to help you relax, some playful effects like forgetting your name or losing a memory, or some helpful things. Recently, I released a file called As New, which gives someone the feeling of experiencing something as new, so they can read their favorite book again and enjoy it as if for the first time.
What a fantastic thing.
It was a brilliant idea by someone on the channel, actually, that was like, hey, why doesn't this exist? And I'm like, yeah, that is actually a good idea. It also allows me to experiment with very many aspects of erotic hypnosis. For example, we haven't even touched on many of the other things that are possible. For example, transformation is one that is very prevalent in the erotic kink community. And transformation can be physical into a furry creature or into a completely different shape. It can be mental, into like 50s housewife or bimbo, or even the other way, into more powerful and strong. Then there is the whole power exchange aspect of like the dominant and the submissive, or master slave, or daddy and little. There's also tools for public play, like files to listen while you do something else or while you are somewhere else. There's no end to the possibilities. Your imagination is the limit. Absolutely.
And actually, there's a bigger crossover, I think, with what's traditionally seen as erotic hypnosis, the clinical world. So good example, the transformational stuff that you were just talking about is actually, I work, you know, as a kink-friendly hypnotherapist, I work quite a lot with the transvestite community. And what they often want to experience is that feeling of being a strong, powerful woman. And with hypnosis, they're able to do that in a very safe, comfortable way, so that they can start to experience that. And also it's the whole part of self-acceptance, and being able to be whatever you want to be is actually a massive part of self-acceptance, isn't it? So it is, you know, so there is a much bigger crossover. You know, people often see erotic hypnosis, clinical hypnosis, stage hypnosis, but actually, you know, everything does overlap at some point, and in a very beneficial way to the person using it, I think.
I agree. And in fact, I would highly recommend clinical hypnotists to look into stage hypnosis and erotic hypnosis to look at techniques that are used.
Mm.
For myself, for example, I very much studied clinical hypnosis to learn more about how it works, how the mechanics are underneath the surface. But at the same time, it's also really important to understand the draw that people have to hypnosis, the reactions that they have, the both emotional and very physical reactions that people give, and to use that. Something as simple as how arousal can be linked to a deeper trance, I'm sure is not an uncommon suggestion in your repertoire as well.
Absolutely. And it's a lot. The thing is as well, isn't it? It's that it can be a lot of fun. And I think by exploring hypnosis fully with everything that it has to offer, ultimately it helps people to be better hypnotists. And that's surely our goal as hypnotists, is to be the best hypnotist that we can be, isn't it? You know?
The best in the world, according to most teachers.
So it's, you know, I'm very keen to educate about what erotic hypnosis is, because it has had this kind of, in the way that hypnosis had for many years, it was seen as something that was kind of a bit seedy and you know, and erotic hypnosis isn't necessarily like that. Just as sex, you know, people are becoming much more open about different sexualities and different sexual practices, and it's becoming much more commonplace. And I'd certainly like to see, you know, people feeling much more confident about using erotic hypnosis, say, with a partner. I mean, what could be more fun than kind of being able to whisper something in your partner's ear and cause them great pleasure? I mean, what a lovely thing. It's not even necessarily about dominance and submission, is it? It's
Not at all.
enjoyment and pleasure.
One of the interesting things is that one of the things that erotic hypnosis is role play.
Yeah.
It is very real to the people who practice in it. And it is a matter of trust. It is a very intimate thing to allow someone to direct your unconscious in something that is extremely important to you, because sexuality is some of the most like intimate and important things in your life.
Absolutely.
And it's also some of the things that you respond the strongest to.
Mm-hmm.
This is also why we started with the discussion about consent, is before we begin, we want to make sure that this is done safely, that we trust each other to give us a warning if something goes wrong and to share what goes right. So we can both improve and we can both enjoy it to the fullest.
Absolutely. And it has such a connecting aspect as well, doesn't it? You know, that people don't always realize, because essentially it's a shared state, it's a shared energy where two people are in that same place together at the same time, which when you look at how good sex works, that's essentially what happens when people connect, isn't it? And hypnosis allows people to connect, I think, on an even deeper level than that. And often it's connection in the world generally that's missing, isn't it? You know,
it very often is. And connecting on that intimate unconscious level is very vulnerable as well, which is why it is so important to do so like in a way that feels comfortable for everyone.
But also by that, you know, vulnerability provides growth, doesn't it, as well? And you know, it's one of those things where by allowing yourself to be consciously vulnerable in a consenting way with somebody that you've negotiated with, to me seems a much better idea than just being vulnerable with somebody that you don't know, you know, which is what often happens in the vanilla world, isn't it? So there's a lot to be learned from this, I think.
There's also an interesting aspect of erotic hypnosis that would be missing from clinical hypnosis, is that vulnerability goes both ways.
Mm.
In a way, the trust that you give a hypnotist is also given back in the trust towards your subject. You trust them to communicate with you about what they feel, about what they experience, because you want to be part of this experience. It's not a distant situation where you're looking at a subject going through an experience as a hypnotist, at least for myself, I want to be part of that experience. I want to join them in what they're feeling, in what they're experiencing. And that means that I also share some vulnerability from my end.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be extremely healthy and extremely beautiful to watch, because that intensifies both the connection and the trance and the effects, and it just makes a much better experience.
Absolutely. But there's also the flip side to this, where people want to experience something, they can actually use things like files, audios, can't they, downloads to help them do that even more safely, if you like, if they're not wanting to interact, or they're just wanting to try something out or experience something, where they can use that audio completely by themselves. They're in the safety of their own home. You know, they can allow themselves just to go with that flow and have that experience without necessarily having to do anything with anybody, which is also a really cool way to explore, I think.
It is. One of the interesting reactions I've had to making audio files, because I did sessions long before I started making audio files, that the audio files make someone feel that there's zero expectation. An audio file doesn't judge. It doesn't go like, no, you're not deep enough. It can't. It will just continue no matter what you do. And in a way, taking away that expectation allows them to go like surprisingly deep, even for themselves.
And it also allows them to just explore it the way they want to explore it and experience whatever it is that they need to experience.
At their own pace, at their own leisure, like nobody looks at them, nobody listens to them. They're just there exploring on their own.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the mind is such a powerful thing. It's such an amazing thing. And ultimately, you know, all arousal starts in the mind, doesn't it? You know, everything starts within there. And we often look at things physically, but ultimately it started in here and then it's transposed into the body, which is an amazing thing. And of course, that can be altered and changed and enhanced and all kinds of wonderful things via hypnosis. And, you know, and erotically, you know, even sometimes when we do that, when you think about clinically, we might take somebody from a state of anxiety into a state of calm. All erotic hypnosis is doing is doing something else with that process that the mind is able to produce, which is a super cool thing.
And as a slight aside, one of the subtle things that people forget is that because hypnosis can be used with very like small tools, just your voice or a touch, you can do so very safely in public without being visible, which allows for some very naughty and playful things without bothering anyone else. Because nobody else is knowing what's happening inside the mind of the subject.
Absolutely. And that, you know, what more could you want than to have a pleasure-filled mind in a very busy and often hectic world? It's quite nice, isn't it? So where can people find you? Because I know you have hundreds of files that are available, and you do Nimja Live and all kinds of things. Where can people find more about you and what you do?
So on YouTube, I am Nimja Hypnosis. And online, you can find me at hypno.nimja.com. Most of my material is free because I feel that it's nice to just give people the opportunity to experience as much as possible, like in their own way, that they're not obligated to pay for something before they experience it.
So, and I know there's all kinds of stuff on there. I had a look at your site. There's all kinds of non-clinical things. You can even filter out the erotic things, so you can just have the non-erotic things, I guess.
With one click you have only I call them the gentle files, because of course as hypnotists we avoid negative language, so it's not called non-erotic. And I couldn't find a better word than gentle, so that's what it is.
Gentle's a good word. Gentle's always a good word. And there's always...
It's nicer than clinical or than innocent or just, you know.
Yeah, gentle hypnosis. I like that. We'll go with that. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for spending some time and coming and talking to us. I think it's important that you know, people start to learn about the, you know, erotic hypnosis in a positive way, what it actually is rather than what they think it is, which is often the case, isn't it? So I do really appreciate you coming on and speaking to us, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
With much pleasure.
Thank you. And if you're enjoying watching Trancing in the Sheets, then also remember that there are another 7 hosts on the Hypnosis 247 Live Network, one of whom is the world's fastest hypnotist, Sean Michael Andrews. So don't forget to check out his show. He's got lots of interesting guests on there too. So thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Trancing in the Sheets.
Get ready.